So we're going to wait just another minute here, perhaps, but we have several committee members and several guests here on the call right now. And I know at least one of us has to leave shortly to go to a graduation ceremony. So hopefully.
That just got canceled, Jerry.
Oh, it did? Oh, okay.
Because of the rain, they just postponed it till tomorrow midday. So Cutler's, I gotta wait, so I can now be here for the whole meeting.
Oh,
so
great. Fabulous. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mother Nature.
Yeah.
Frank, I've got 5 o'clock, so at your pleasure, I guess. I will, start this up when, and I'll try to keep track of who's joining and whatnot. But with that, I'm going to actually start the recording here, and you can start the meeting.
Okay, hello everybody. It's 5 o'clock, so we'll begin our meeting with our roll call. Jerry has everyone who is on Zoom. I don't know if we have any other phone call-ins. No.
Nope.
And any members of the public are out? Nothing. Okay. Perfect. So that's good. So next item is our approval of our minutes. Excuse me, I got to read. So did everybody get a copy of the minutes from the last meeting? We all good? Okay. So we need to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Chad.
Yep.
Seconded. Second.
Second by Larry Grundy. Any discussion? Anybody have any issues with what we had? If no discussions, all in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Got that one. If not, motion passes for our minutes from the last meeting. And we'll go down to our next is public comment. I don't know if we've had anything brought in, Jerry.
So yeah, we've got several members of the public here that were invited for particular reasons. We've got Michael Luthi from lacrosse, Heather from football, John from football, and I believe that's it. I also did invite a couple of gentlemen from the cricket community, but I don't see either one of them on the thing here. So I guess we will be discussing the multi-purpose fields, but I guess if any of them have comments now, that's fine, or they can wait until we get to the discussion item.
Okay, fine, thanks. So next is our new business, and today our business is the review of the multi-purpose fields in the town. What I would do is let the discussion start with Chad with the history of what he has brought and his update from May when he went back to look at things. So Chad, if you would start, that would be great.
The quick summary is basically, we did go back, we updated everything. We went through the rest of the numbers, tallied some additional stuff in there. And the short of it is by the assessment numbers, when you look at need, basically the demand, what we have as far as the supply goes, right now to meet the demand, our assessment numbers show that we need 3 full-size athletic fields. That hasn't changed dramatically. It's gone up and down by a percentage, basically, about half of a field, basically, when you look at the numbers over the last couple of years, depending on fields coming online and fields going offline. So if I remember correctly, it's right at like 2.86 or something like that is the number of quote unquote fields we need to meet the current demand with the current amount of both youth and adults and high school sports all using the fields at one time.
So Chad, just to, for a point of clarification, we've got a number of people from the community here. So in just brief terms, just to maybe bring them up to speed, and you kind of used a lot of jargon there that I think the members of this task force might understand, but some of our guests might not fully understand what you just said.
Sure. So to try and ask questions freely, but basically, I think it was back in 2013, we first started doing the needs assessment for the town for fields. We went out and evaluated all the fields, all different types of fields, all the different sizes of fields and the conditions that they're in. We then, polled all the different sports and athletic groups, adult, high school, youth, everybody, and came up with both the demand of how many hours we need per each field type, both how much do we need and how much do we have available. And then we kind of just go through a spreadsheet on that. We've been able to keep updating it with the 2020 plan, with the schools coming online, what fields are going away, what fields are coming back online, by hopefully next year, and try to be adjusting those numbers. And so, yeah, I'm a little too deep into it in the weeds, so I know a lot of it, but that's basically, we look at it from a numbers perspective. How many kids can you get on a field? How much rest does the field need in order to recover and not trample if it's natural grass, for the next use? And it also programs, basically from day, when school ends till dark is how we program a field also. So that's the other thing I put out there, because it's not always perfect when we do our numbers. For high school, they obviously want the fields available for every team right after school. So you don't have to have a team come back at 8 o'clock at night to practice from, 8 to 8:30 or something. So, but that's how we do it, just from a kind of a very analytical numbers perspective, just looking at how much we need, how much we have, and what the difference is. And once we have the hours, it's basically hours per week of a difference. And then we can calculate how many fields we need to meet that demand.
And just, sorry, if I could, just a point of clarification. So when you say the town needs 3 full-size fields, you're talking about the gap
Correct.
between what we have and what's needed. Gotcha.
Yep.
So Chad, right now, when you say full fields, you're talking the high school football field. What
Well,
are
I'm talking we need 3 full-size multi-use fields. That's not really the football itself. Football is a particular sport. Right now, by the hours and the numbers, the need in theory is met by the numbers, by the fields that we have at Quantic Plains and at the high school, and what they use at Colchester. It's not necessarily, Colchester's not a good field, but it's obviously used. But there wasn't a need. The need was for the multi-use rectangle, the full-size rectangle that houses, a variety of sports.
So, and how many do we have today?
I'd have to go back and look. I can probably pull up the sheet. I mean, we went through that sheet last meeting. And I can go back and.
There are 3 full-size fields at Pequannock Plains Park. There's another full-size field at the Groton Community Center. There are, the new artificial surface field at the middle school was included in this count. We are losing a multi-purpose field at the Cutler School, but we're kind of getting one back, and the same thing at the West Side School and those kinds of things. So there's a little bit of adjustments there, and part of the factoring that Chad does, just a reminder for everybody, and maybe the first time some of you have heard this, some of these fields are under the control of Board of Ed, so that reduces the amount of time that the community has use of those fields. So even though we're getting an artificial artificial surface field at the middle school, which is right behind Mr. Whiteluff there, he's got a great picture of it. We will have limited use of that because it's going to be, for particular Board of Ed activities and things like that. So there's a little bit of a, part of what we need to do, Chad's got the data that says we need 3 fields. Part of this exercise that we're going through here today is to kind of give it the smell test or the gut check or whatever you want to say. Is 3 fields, additionally, is that going to serve the needs of lacrosse and field hockey and soccer and cricket or anybody else who might use multi-purpose fields in the town? That's the you know, the kind of the maybe the more subjective or anecdotal kind of exercise we're going through here, because, you know, the data tells us one thing and we need to kind of just confirm that or change those numbers in some way to account for things that maybe the data just didn't, you know, account for. So for those of you who are here at this meeting for the first time, that's exactly why you're invited here, you know, just to kind of give us your feedback on that. You know, what Chad has just told us. We have 3 fields that the data say we need. Do we think that that's going to serve the needs that you have and you know, across the board? So
Yeah, and if I can jump back in there, I just was pulling up data again, Frank, to try to answer your question a little bit. So just counting through, I think I just counted that we have 7 fields right now, 7 full-size rectangles that we counted. However, when we factor in both use and the condition, right now it equals out to about an existing fields of 4.3 fields, because a lot of those fields are in pretty bad condition. You know, one of the fields, for example, that we count is the oral school property. You know, and that's probably going away. We still have it counted. It doesn't count very much because it's, you know, it's got a condition assessment of a half of a field, and it's got a use assessment of little less than that. So when it, you know, it equals out to a very minimal amount of field, but that's how we count up as many fields as are used by anybody. It doesn't have to be a good field. You know, the library field is another great example. That behind the library, it's a small U8 field. It gets used, and so we count it. But we try to take the factoring into that as to both the condition and the time it's available, and that's how we factor out.
Okay.
Can I say something real quick? You know, I want to thank you for inviting me, Jerry. Absolutely. There's a lot of distinguished people here and a lot of people that have given back to the community for many, many years. So I thank you. I wanted to ask, you know, is there any dissemination between a practice field and a game field? Because, you know, over the years, Fitch High School certainly didn't have, like, for example, soccer, didn't necessarily practice in great areas. Oral school, as you said, was a field that was used for many years, and that was in very bad, poor shape. I know the girls practice out, or boys either way, practice on the baseball field, so that certainly deteriorates that outfield. And Quantic Lanes, I don't know if that has changed, Jerry. I haven't been out of it for a while, but Quantic Lanes is primarily a game field instead of necessarily a practice. So just curious, there was a distinction between practice and games.
Yeah, our assessment did not distinguish between practice field or a game field. So like the high school, where, you know, we very limit what happens on the high school football field to essentially just games, and even limited games at that. That does not get factored in. It gets counted as a full-size football field that is available for use.
Oh, the practice field does it. Okay.
No, I'm saying the actual football field, like inside the track.
Okay.
You know, that didn't get discounted in a use perspective, even though in reality, it's only really used for games. So that's where the gut check for this, as Jerry alluded to, you know, that's the point of this, is to kind of say, hey, by the numbers, very analytically, we think we need, you know, 3 fields to kind of meet the demand. Everybody here uses the fields quite a bit. And so that's the kind of, the idea is, does that feel like that's the right number? You know, does 3 fields think, you know, it'll solve the needs for each of the organizations that are here, or is that not enough or too much, is the question.
So are these fields synthetic, or we're talking natural grass, or both?
Right now, by the numbers, they are natural grass.
Okay.
Synthetic, we get a little bit more use out of them.
Yep.
So, just for simplicity's sake, we've just kept it as natural grass. But if we were to put in synthetic, then obviously we get a little more use out of them.
So
Gotcha.
I want to just stop there, Frank. Do you have the panelists listed on your screen
I do.
on the right? Okay, so if you look there, do you see that Councilor Zapiri has a hand up? And if you just kind of pay attention to people who are indicating an interest in speaking. So I just want to point that out.
I will do that. Yep. So my question, Chad, is so if these fields that we have now existing, let's say, were to have lights, have synthetic, whatever the increases might be, that would also increase their, much like we had spoken other fields, it increased their usage, their time that we can use them, obviously the variety of things we can use. So it might lessen the amount of fields, but obviously there'd be a cost associated with upgrading to that.
Correct. And that was something we had looked at for the Park and Rec department now probably 2 or 3 years ago, when we kind of said, okay, if we spend the money to just upgrade the fields we have, how much does that meet our need? And obviously we wouldn't upgrade every single field across town, but we kind of looked at the stuff at Fitch Middle and 1 or 2 others. I think it might have been even Claude Chester, trying to get a couple other fields up. And the impact wasn't as significant as we had hoped. And we can run the numbers again, but yes, if we were to take obviously say the Fitch Middle and turn that into a synthetic turf field, then that would have a pretty dramatic impact. But right now we also know that Fitch Middle is programmed pretty heavily, even though it's not a very good field and not very good condition and needs a lot of work. It's programmed to pretty much the fullest extent. So if we go and put synthetic turf out there, it would allow it to be programmed a little later into the evening. It allows to have bigger events run on it because the turf doesn't get destroyed. But it might not actually solve the need that much because it's currently being used more than it should be anyways, right? I mean, kind of the story there is that we need 3 fields just to meet the demand. But the reality is all those uses, we're cramming them in somewhere. We're either putting more people on the field than we should, which is causing, maintenance costs to go up because we're just trampling the grass, or we're just not even doing the maintenance. Like I'd say Claude Chester, that dirt out there is like a brick. The fact that we let kids play out there is pretty atrocious, and that is what it is, right? And so a lot of money needs to be spent, but those fields are already fully programmed, and they're over programmed at this point. So yes, we could fix some up, but it's probably going to mean more than just fixing up what we have.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ed, go ahead. Sorry, I did see your hand, Ed.
Yeah, no worries. And first of all, I haven't met a whole lot of you yet. My name's Ted. Don't call me Ed, I'm Ted. But Ted Keller, I'm the new principal at the high school. And
Got it.
Sorry. No worries. And I'm pretty new to this conversation. And so primarily I just wanted to listen to what people had to say. And, but I have to say that one of the things I've been hearing a lot about since coming to Fitch has been, the football field and the condition of the football field and the use of the football field. One of the things that, obviously, I'm a little bit selfish in that I'm looking at the high school primarily, but I know that based upon what I saw, especially in the fall, obviously I didn't get a lot of the spring sports feel yet, was that, our students are going out and, going off campus a lot for their practices, for their games. I'm wondering what we talked a little bit about the field upgrades. A lot of people have talked to me about getting a turf field at the high school. If we had a turf field and a multi-use turf field, not just football, but allowing for soccer, lacrosse, both boys and girls, field hockey, You have all the lines on it. That then takes us off of your fields at the very least for games, but a lot for practices as well. How does that help you in terms of increasing your use of the fields for the kids? Secondary to that also is, the kids being more excited about playing on a field like that, so that you can have youth football games out there, you can have youth soccer games out there, and you're not overusing the field overall. So, that's one thing that I had, Mark certainly talked to me a little bit about it, and I've heard a lot from the community as well. I'm just wondering how that would work with the usage numbers.
Sure. Ted, I think I can take a swing at that one. The first thing is that the charge of this task force is to come up with a comprehensive plan that serves both school needs and community needs. So, when we finish our work here, we expect to have an answer for both of those questions. Groton is a bit unique, and we've spent some time discussing how unique Groton is in these shared facilities. But the end goal here is to have something that works for everybody. And yes, and our next meeting, in fact, is to speak just strictly about high school fields. So we've started this process in talking about baseball, softball fields around town. Tonight we're talking about multi-purpose fields, and the next discussion we're going to have is focused next week. In fact, on the 18th is strictly on high school needs. So we're going through this kind of systematically in a way that we should come up with an answer that yes serves the community, yes serves the Board of Ed, and then moving forward. And Frank, I'm going to remind you on the right-hand side of your screen there, do you see that there is a hand raised by Councilor Zapiri? There's a little hand symbol right next to his name. And you're on mute.
I don't see it now, but I did see it earlier, yes.
Okay, so, well, yeah, Councilor Zapiri does have his hand raised, so he's had it up there for a while, so.
Okay.
I don't think I should dominate this meeting. As a counselor, I know that whatever we decide at the task force level, it's going to have to come to the council for funding. It would be very helpful to know, in addition to the demand numbers, the number of fields we need by demand, is to know who's demanding. We need to know what leagues are in town. We need to know the names of the leagues, the number of teams in the leagues, the numbers of players on each team, whether or not everyone who wants to be on a team is placed on a team. So those are things that are going to come up for discussion as we're talking about dollars to actually buy the fields or to spend to upgrade the fields, whatever. And I think we have to get that information together. Also, the age range of the people on the teams. I think, you can look to different utilizations of the fields for older people. I mean, you can look for later game times. I understand from the last meeting we had that mothers don't like to have their children coming home at late, but certainly some of the young adults can make it home later than the children. So the utilization of the fields might be something we can look at from that point of view. But ultimately, it's going to require, I think, a lot of money to develop the fields that we want to get. And we're going to have to weigh, the values in spending that money. So somehow or other, I think we have to get together the numbers on the number of leagues, the number of teams in each league, the number of players in each team, the question of whether or not everybody can play, and the issue of the age of the people who are playing.
Well, I'll jump in there real quick, Councilor Zapiri. We have that for the most part. I shouldn't say we have it entirely, but for the most part, the spreadsheet that we have, it has every single team of every single league, every single kid, male, female, age, everything in the spreadsheet. So we counted, we went out to every single league that uses the fields, had them provide us their usage numbers and their age ranges. And that's what we use to be able to calculate what fields they play on and for what levels. So like U8 soccer doesn't need to be on a full-size rectangle. And so that's where we tailored that, the usage of those numbers. And you tend to get a whole lot of kids playing U8 soccer. By the time they're U14, the numbers have thinned down dramatically. That's kind of the same with all sports. So we have a lot of those numbers, and we can definitely get the data to you. The
Chad,
only
could you
question I
send that to me?
can't, what?
Could you send that to me, Chad?
Absolutely. Yep. The only one I can't really answer great, you said, is it open to all kids in Groton? And from my knowledge, I believe all of them are. The only ones that I can't be 100% on are the two baseball leagues that we talked about last meeting. And I think it's open to all kids in the town. And we did ask them the question when they're here that they do have a couple players that come from Stonington, I think, on one of the teams. There's the one travel league that takes people from all over. We did not count their numbers. It's somebody that's a true recruiting kids from all over. Those aren't included in our numbers. But the two baseball travel teams, I believe they're open to all Groton residents. I don't think they have cuts, but that would be a question we can ask for them. Do they?
They have tryouts, don't they? Do the teams have tryouts?
I'm assuming so, but Mark Romano, maybe you have a good answer for that.
Yeah, so basically they're kind of like handpicked, those teams, for the most part, those baseball teams, and I wouldn't say that all those kids are from Groton. I would say that they're from, they're from a variety of different towns, I think, whether it's some East Lyme, Stonington,
You're talking
whatever
about the
it may be.
baseball travel teams?
Yeah, the two or three AAU teams. I know we just got a request for another AAU team to use the high school facility as well. So that would be now a third team that has not used it in the past. But I think due to the Schooners not having a program this year, I think it opened the door in a sense to allow possibly another team to use that facility. But yeah, to answer your question, it's not primarily Groton kids, it's or Mystic kids, it's kids from various towns.
So those are the two and now possibly three travel baseball teams that are a little bit more selective. All the other programs that we counted, and that's on some level, that's why we hadn't counted them in our initial survey of people, because it wasn't a quote unquote just a town team. Groton Mystic Lacrosse, we're open to every single, anybody that wants to play can play, and we have scholarships if you can't afford it, so you can be there. And so a lot of times, if it's what we consider a true travel team, which is one that recruits kids and builds a team, and you have to pay a little bit more to play, and you're traveling far distances, a lot of times we don't count those in on a town need, because that's a little bit more of a selective. It's not just a town facility you're being used by, open to the whole town. So I think that's a question that we probably want to discuss as a committee, about baseball in the future. As we further discuss the need of baseball, it went from one field to three fields when we tallied in the travel teams. And so that might be the discussion to have in the future as to how much, input do we let the travel teams have. As far as the multi-use go, none of the numbers that we have, in there were from a travel team perspective. It's all youth sports open to everybody in the public, or it's some of the adult leagues that is still also open to everybody in the public. In some cases, draws people from outside of town in to use the field, but they also pay for the use of the field.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, when we're talking about multi-use fields, are we looking at it also, and I know we have this info, but, by time frame as well, because I think, like in the fall season, for example, where you have youth football, we'll say with, 3 or 4 teams, you have youth soccer with a couple different teams, all needing, in high school sports as well that, we have there, middle school sports. So is, I guess, the number 7, right? Based on the 4 that we have now, and then the need for 3, I guess the question would be, based on everything that we have going on during that time period, let's just say from 5 o'clock on, do we fulfill those needs, right? Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, I'd say that's also the question as to you know, again, from a numbers perspective, analytically, we look at it from basically 3:30 until dark.
Right.
Right. And so we program every hour out, even, and doesn't take into account for the fact that there's going to be the majority want to use the fields from really 3 o'clock to 6 or 7. You know, and then typically the adult leagues get, you know, if there's a higher demand that can't be met, the adult leagues get pushed back later and later. If you add a field that's multi-use or excuse me, synthetic turf, and you add lights, then obviously we see those fields with lights and synthetic turf getting programmed till close to midnight, because the demand is there. The adult leagues will come in and fill it. It's just that it's not even available, so they're not even asking at this point. So.
And I agree. I think the key to it, you know, to it is lights and synthetic turf. I think if that's factored into it, you know, as part of the 3 additional fields, I think that's kind of, that makes a lot more sense. And based on what I've been dealing with, and, you know, it allows us, I think 3 would be okay, because we'd have, you know, kind of a little more time on it, you know, let's just say, and just speaking with the high school, not to get off track, but, you know, if we had 1, maybe 2 fields, we could get through all our stuff within that time period, you know, synthetic lit. So whether that's games and practices, you know, and that would free up, kind of like what Ted was saying, you know, other facilities for other programs, you know, and I know, you know, so that's kind of, I think 3, again, I think 3 with synthetic and lights, I think, yes, that would be doable. I know it's more money, but, you know, based on need, I think that's where we're kind of at.
Mark, I just have a quick question for Chad, if that's possible. Mark, with the 3 fields, or with synthetic and with lighting, like ballpark, like, would it be fair to say like $1 million a field from the beginning, right? Is that pretty much?
Pretty close. Yeah, we're building 3 fields for Mitchell right now, a full size, all synthetic, a full size baseball, full size softball, and a full size multi-use. And all 3 together are just over, you know, 3 million, almost 3.5 when you factor in some of the amenities. But I will note that's without lights. So
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. That's without lights, and then lights are another 80.
I was just going to say 100 to 200,000, depending on how you're lighting the field and if you get any economies, right? If you have fields next to each other and you can use common poles and light in 2 ways, then you save some money.
Gotcha.
But yeah, generally I'd say a safe, just ballpark number without any designs, without any site issues, you know, $1 million to $1.5 million a field is a round number to guess at. And right now what we're seeing is the synthetic turf actually isn't too much more than natural turf. Because the synthetic prices have come down enough. You know, back when Pequannock Plains was built, that was, you know, we were probably about 750,000 a field for, you know, natural turf back then. And then it kind of crept up for a while, and then it started going back down again. And now synthetic was a lot higher. Now it's come down to be pretty comparable to natural grass.
And for points of discussion, I think in the future, 2 things. One is for Pequannock, theoretically, we can't do lights because of a promise that was made councils before. Is that kind of out there, but up for discussion? That's number 1. And number 2 would be, do we have any information or background on the safety of the synthetic fields? I know that was a concern with regards to what kind of, you know, what was used as a synthetic and whether that can cause some issues or not.
So Bruce, let me jump in there and kind of respond to that. Since I've been at the town of Groton for about 20 years, which I showed up right after Pequannock Plains opened. And since that time, I have heard a lot of people say there are no lights allowed at Pequannock Plains Park. I have yet in 20 years to put my hands on any kind of a document that said that, put it in writing or anything. I don't, you know, it may have been something that was said to folks, but it certainly isn't in any of the documentation that I have seen anywhere in our office or anywhere in researching around the town. So, you know, whether the council or somebody would, you know, choose to, you know, put lights down there, I think it's an open question. At least in my mind, I haven't heard anything definitively that says you can't.
And maybe it's Frank, we can add it to an agenda of a meeting and just see if we can do some research and, just kind of report back to the council as a committee on exactly where we think at least it stands.
Yep. And then what was your second question there, Bruce? Was
the safety of the type of field used.
Oh, yeah, there are different types of synthetic turf, and most of them use kind of a similar material for the blades of grass, if you will, type stuff. But the infill is kind of the stuff that tends to be of more concern. Sometimes people put in crumb rubber, so it's several inches thick of crumb rubber, kind of holding these little blades of grass up. And I believe the one that they're doing at the middle school now has some type of a natural infill that is, potentially has less chemicals or toxic, properties than crumb rubber. So yeah, there are different materials that you can use for infill. And I don't know, Chad, maybe you're the expert on what the relative likability of them in terms of performance or safety is, but yeah, there are differences in those.
It comes down to the infill for the most part. Connecticut about a year ago kind of really got up in arms about the crumb rubber, the rubber infill. There was a lot of worry about carcinogens coming out of it. That for the most part, all the studies that we've seen and all the studies that actually Connecticut Department of Health has on file all show that it's safe, that there's no adverse risk. However, that doesn't stop people from still fearing it a little bit. And so what I believe is going in at the new middle school site is a sand infill. That's the natural is, if you don't do crumb rubber, you do sand. A lot of the ones we're doing, we do a little bit of a blend of both. It's a little bit of crumb plus a little bit of sand, and then you get the right amount of fluff and the right amount of give in the turf. And so, because sand, if you do just sand, it can be a pretty hard surface too. So you have to sometimes put a pad underneath of the sand to get the right absorption. But yes, right now, technically everything is deemed safe, but there is some concern over the crumb rubber. But if you omit the crumb rubber, it does make the price go up quite a bit. It's several $100,000 more for just if you do the pad and the sand infill over the crumb rubber.
So I'm wondering if maybe we can also, Frank, add that to the the report that we give. If we're going to go with a certain type of field we recommend, and do a little, I guess, research, or take what Chad's saying and kind of make a recommendation in the report with regards to that too.
So just to maybe bring everybody up to speed here too on the kind of the process that we're going through. Right now, again, we're trying to kind of just determine the number of fields that we need. As we move forward, after we kind of determine that number of fields we need, then we need to start, just as Bruce is suggesting, that we need to kind of look at alternatives. Where can we put fields? Which locations can have lights, which ones can't have lights, which ones are, appropriate for a natural surface field. And we have to kind of wrap all of those things up. Once we know how many fields we need, then we come up with a plan for how we're going to meet that need. And then, then the third step is, what do we think it's going to cost? And then at that point, and hopefully that happens before the end of the year, we're going to be handing that over to the town council and city leaders to determine, how they want us to move forward. So everything that you're saying, Bruce, from lights up aquatic planes to what type of material we recommend on inside of those, I think that's the second step of this. Once we determine how many fields we need, then we go for how many are going to be natural, how many are going to be synthetic, how many are going to be lighted, what kind of infill, all those kinds of details are kind of in the second step of the process. So thank you for actually thinking ahead.
So I have just one question, Chad. So in your numbers, the new middle school full field, is that in there at all at this point? And how would you count that as a 0.5, just like you would because it's owned by the Board of Ed versus Parks and Rec.
You're muted, Chad.
Sorry, Chad, you're muted.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks. So we actually, in the case of the new middle school, we counted it as a condition of 1 because it's going to be a brand new perfect field. And then the use assessment, we put it at a 1.5, right? So normally a perfect field that you have full use is a total 1. It's normally 1 and below. A synthetic field gets a rating of not quite 2. It's normally 1.75. And so we just knocked that score down a little bit because it's on a school facility and it won't be open, all times for anybody in the public to use. And obviously the school gets first dibs on who uses it and when.
So a second question. So the youth football field, right? So they use that at Pequannock as a game field, which to make it as beautiful as it is. So where they practice now, how do you, we probably, without looking, we probably consider that field a point something. How you count that now as a full field at a low level though, obviously.
Yes.
Which is unsuitable for the needs of them. I mean, get back to the practice part of it, right? So how do we talk about the practice field? So those kids are on that field 5 days a week for 3 months. You're going to completely trash any field that they use because you're using it that much. So do we recommend that something like that has, I mean, you're not going to lay turf down there just to practice on, I get it. But when you go along with the fields, when the usage, the turf field will make more sense because essentially they can use it all day, every day, right?
Correct. And they are obviously using it all day. And I see Jonathan raising his hand, so I want them to jump in and from a football perspective, gut check the numbers for sure. But my short answer is when we tallied up that field, it basically comes in, it quantifies analytically to about 1/3 of a field, right? By the time you factor in the use drop and the condition of the field, it's about a value of a 0.3 of a real field. So that's where the demand isn't meeting because they're obviously using it, and so is lacrosse and so is other teams, 5 days a week, but it shouldn't be used. The condition's not good enough, and none of the amenities are there and stuff like that. So they're using it way more, but that's why it gets a score of a 0.3.
Right. John Grossman, I know you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead.
Let me just unmute. That was a good point. That's what I was trying to say. A couple things. Question about the lights, certainly for Pequannock Plains. I think, Jerry, that Bob Perazzotti would be one to talk to. I think he was involved in all that process way back when. And even lights right now, I mean, myself putting with Little League, putting those lights on Calvin Burrows Field, the residual light is barely anything, and there's houses right next to that baseball field. So to put lights on Plains would be minimal residual lighting towards any houses in that area. So that's one thing. The other thing is that my question was about, with Quadchester eventually closing and that field being probably, I don't know, Jerry, was the Park and Rec Commission still moving forward on their process or their proposal for a multi-use field down there for baseball and everything else? So I don't know how those can coincide with this. And as you said, Groton Mystic football uses that field, even though it's a 0.3. That's a place that is very useful for Groton Mystic and especially lacrosse. So it's like we have our own home and no one really bothers us. And we have over 300 kids between cheer and football that are involved. So just wanting to plan forward in the future when that school gets shut down and whatever renovations are going to happen there, where do those programs go? Okay.
All right, to try to answer your question there, John, about the, I guess one of the things that comes to mind for me, and you mentioned that the lights are, maybe more technologically advanced now where they can focus the light better than they could, 20 years ago. All those kinds of things have changed. And the other thing that's changed is, I think, back when Pequannock Plains Park was constructed, there wasn't unanimity in the town that that was a good idea. I mean, there were people in the town that were, against building Pequannock Plains Park. I think today, if there is somebody who's against Pequannock Plains Park, I haven't talked to him. I mean, I think that the community almost unanimously supports Pequannock Plains Park. I have not heard anybody who says that that was a bad investment by the town. So, even if, the use of Pequannock Plains Park were to change or something like that, I think the perception of what's going on down there in the community has changed over 20 years from the day it was built to now. So, what people had in their brain 20 years ago about thinking about this park and, and putting lights on it and things like that, I think that reality has changed for anybody who was probably here at the time, and those people who have come in here since then probably have even more different opinions. And but the other answer to your question about Claude Chester School, no, we don't have any. The Parks and Rec Department doesn't have any plans. We are here with this task force trying to develop plans for how we're going to use whatever properties or facilities or purchasing or whatever it might take to meet the needs. So we're coming here with a blank slate. We're not, limiting ourselves to looking just at existing town properties or properties that the Board of Ed is accessing or anything like that. We're right now, like I say, in this, how many fields do we need stage? And then after that, then we look at, okay, we've got a need for X number of fields. Where do we think the best place to put those is? Maybe it is Pequannock, or maybe it is Claude Chester School. Maybe it is, another school that's Mary Morrison School that might be closing down in a few years, or what have you. I don't know the answer. Or maybe we buy the driving range and put fields in there. There's all kinds of options, but that's something that's the second step of our process.
So back to the original question, right? So the data shows 3 additional rectangular fields. When you say that, I just want to make sure we're talking full size rectangles.
Correct. Yeah. By the data, we have enough, and especially because of the way the fields are getting rebuilt at a couple of the new elementary schools, we should have a surplus of the small rectangles, but we have a deficit of the 3 full-size rectangles, multi-use fields.
And again, that wouldn't take into account whether at that point, the number would go down. I don't know if you could get it down to just 2 fields if you turfed 1 or 2 fields. Let's say for argument's sake, you turf the high school field.
Yeah.
Does that make the need of, so I'm trying to do as Councilor Superi said, which is absolutely right. So do I eliminate a field if I turf a field? That's kind of like, so if I turf the high school and now I have a brand new turf field at the middle school, do I now delete a need for maybe I only need actually 2 fields out there instead of 3? I know the problem is the issue is 3:30 to 8. I got it. I totally understand. And maybe that is the reason that you would want to go to a third field. I'm just trying to ask the question.
Yeah. So to try to get the information kind of get it out of the data, right? That a lot of these fields are used full time now anyways. So if we go and put them onto synthetic turf, that's great. That allows it so that the grass doesn't get trashed, right? But it doesn't mean we don't need a whole nother field. So if the high school was to go to synthetic turf, it allows us to get a lot more, definitely games on there. It allows the high school to host a lot more games than they're currently able to host, and probably other youth sports as well. I don't know how much practice they'd really get on it because it's going to be utilized quite a bit if that's the only field. But it doesn't cut the need in half. It's just because you get so much more use out of a synthetic turf. It doesn't say if we need 3 now, we're not going to need 1.5 if we put in, a turf one. So the argument probably could be made if we did 2 turf fields, the third one might just be, could be regular grass. Or do you do 1 turf and 2 grass? that's where we could probably split some hairs, but it's not going to be, let's put in one turf and put lights on it and that'll solve all of our problems. That's probably not the answer.
Okay. Larry Grundy?
So with the data, and let me see if I can clearly get this across. One of the things that we talked about with upgrading everything is hosting, the potential of hosting tournaments. So would that now cause increased use? And so would there be need for even maybe more? You see what I'm saying? Does the data take into account like thinking about tournaments?
Excellent question. No, it does not. This is to meet the demand currently that we have right now. Likewise, if football experiences massive growth over the next couple of years, that's not factored into this, or any sport. So this is just the amount of hours that we need right now, and it doesn't include much growth at all.
Go ahead, Mark.
So two things, just to answer one of the questions, I believe that turf field at the middle school is a cork coconut type fill that they put in there. So it's a little bit different than the rubber that a lot of schools have used up till now. But I think the second thing is, I think when we're looking at usage and hours, and I hate to keep going back, but I think the two turf fields make sense, because I think you can, if we went 2 turf and 1 grass, I think the 2 turf fields kind of eliminate a field. I really do, because especially with the lights, I think it allows us, like we've talked about, more hours and more time on it, which in turn we can get more teams and programs on it. I'm not just talking to high school. I'm talking, whether it's soccer, youth football, whatever it may be, and cycle through that, we'll say from, 3:30, I guess, on. You could probably get, depending on how the hours were split up on that field, you could at least get 3 minimal, I would say, of 3 teams on a field from 3:30 on. That's at a minimum. So, if we're looking at numbers wise, where are we at? If we can eliminate, we'll say 3 teams per field, what's that look like? Is that including practices and games? I think that's where we're at, right, at this point.
Right.
So I think that just to make sure everybody understands, we're saying we need 3 multi-purpose fields. You can meet 3 multi-purpose fields by building 3 grass fields, or you have a synthetic field that kind of has a score of above 1. So it's a synthetic field will accommodate more than a 1 valued natural turf field. So yes, if that's the way if that's the consensus of the group, we can certainly move forward with that. And in fact, reaching consensus here tonight on what we need for multi-purpose fields is kind of is what we're here for. So if consensus is, the data, feels right, that gut check that we're doing, that we need 3 fields, and I say 3 fields in the generic sense of 3, we meet that 3 field need with 2 synthetic fields. That's still like a 3 field need. So I'm saying 3 fields in terms of the need, not in terms of physical fields in the town of Groton. So I just want to make sure that, and maybe that's confusing to some people, and it's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around. So yeah, if we can come to consensus, if it's 1, 2, 3, none, whatever it is, and the data tells us 3 fields, do we agree with that? And yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. So I think so. I just wanted one more point of clarification, Chad, because I think what I heard you say when you counted, for instance, the high school football field as a 1, but did I hear you say that you weren't considering the fact that it was very limited use? And so that would be my only push, would be like, if we're considering the Fitch High School football field as a 1 and not factoring the fact that it's really not being used for general purposes outside of a very limited set of games. That would be my only pushback on the number. Otherwise, I think I would agree that 3 sounds like the right number.
Yeah, Mike. So we had it conditioned as a 1, although that's been, I think, argued a little bit this year. But a use, we had it as a 0.5 because of how restricted it is, really just for games. And if anything, kind of games for football priority over everything else. We gave it a 0.5 score on the use. In reality, it's probably less than that, to be very honest with you, because of how limited use it is.
Exactly. Larry?
Just about kind of determination. I mean, I kind of say that we shoot higher because we can't then go back and ask for more if we feel like we need more. You know what I mean? Like once we present it.
So Larry,
Does that make sense?
yeah, and I think one of the things, and Chad said it really quickly, and I'm not sure everybody kind of heard that. Chad's comment was that this, 3 fields meets current demand. That doesn't add anything that is not youth sports. It doesn't add anything that's not high school. It doesn't add anything, as we talk about the town of Groton, in a bigger sense, and who's going to be paying taxes in the town of Groton in coming years, and electric boat hiring people to build a new class of submarines and everything else that's going on. Adult sports is not a big factor in our current use. And, and if we are talking about what it is that we're trying to build to make the town be attractive for people to come in and live here and pay taxes and have a job and make Groton a sustainable community. This, the 3 fields doesn't take that into account. 3 fields means we can have the use that we kind of have today be met. It doesn't mean that, we're accounting for trying to attract young people to come in who want to use fields for ultimate frisbee or kickball or flag football or other things that adults like to do. So, yeah, I guess Larry, part of me would agree with what you say. If you're going to shoot, I guess I would err on the high side because that extra capacity that you have can then be used for, economic development purposes, attracting workers and everything else. So that's, and recognize that that's Jerry, the Parks and Rec professional who's wearing that hat telling you that. So, you got to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, but, truthfully, that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
You could also argue that you could recoup some cost.
Absolutely.
You're not going to charge the youth sports. I honestly don't know how it works down there, but I know at the adult level, the electric boat and the Pfizers and whomever, they're going to pay money to use your field. I mean, you're going to charge them. That's just the way it goes. So you're going to recoup some of the cost should you go up to that next level. I totally agree. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of piggyback on that. Obviously there's the cost involved, which isn't really our determination to figure that out. We're just figuring out the need, but this is also and could potentially be a very good economic driver for the town if done correctly.
Yeah, that, again, part of our study, I don't have it open in front of me right now, but we had hired Kimon Associates out of New York to do the economic impact of running tournaments, depending on how many and the size and all that. But there was a true economic gain to the town of a couple $1 million, from the range of 2 million to close to 7 million, depending on tournaments, of true economic impact to the town if we ran youth tournaments during the summer. And that's not charging for the fields. That's the hotels, that's the restaurants, that's the economic activity that's generated in the town. And what's beautiful, what we really like about that kind of economic activity is it's outside money coming in, right? It's not just money spinning in our circle within Groton. It's money from a different region coming in and being spent in this economy, and then hopefully staying here is what you go for that.
Mr. Costa, yes.
These fields, we say 3 fields, but this can be achieved in a lot of different ways, as I think we've said. That 3 fields could be achieved by renovating land that the town already owns, can be achieved through putting lights, turfing some fields. So, I think that saying 3 fields is a good thing to do, but we need to, and we do, but we need to make sure that everybody on the town council, the Board of Ed, realizes that doesn't mean that we're going out and buying acres of land to create new fields, that it could be achieved in some way up to some number by using what we have. And I think Portia was making that last meeting we had, how some of the facilities on the fields we have need to be updated. So we can get to that number in a number of different ways.
Yep.
So Frank, I think if you can, I'm going to task you with a task of stating consensus if we have it, or arriving at consensus for this meeting. We're at an hour now, so if there's any way possible, we can kind of wrap this one up with multi-purpose fields so we can be prepared for next week to talk about the high school itself.
Right. So
Put that on your plate.
yeah, I would see if anyone has a motion to on one, so we can come to a consensus as a group. I think that's good. I don't disagree with anything that I've heard. I especially like the idea of, if you shoot higher than lower, then that's a good thing. But does anyone would like to make a motion on?
All right, and I would say for those of you who are visiting here and are, I guess that doesn't apply to you. What he just said, you can't make a motion. So members of the committee, you can either choose to make a motion or if we just have kind of a statement of consensus like we did last time, and we just, we'll wrap it all up in a bow at the end, and we say we thought about this many baseball fields, we think it's about this many multi-purpose fields, and this at the high school. With that though, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody say anything other than 3 fields here tonight. I haven't heard a reason why less than 3 fields would be necessary, and I've heard a little bit of discussion about why having maybe more than 3 is advantageous. So where are the committee members with kind of a recommendation or a consensus trying to get there?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for 2 synthetic fields and 2 grass fields.
Is there a second there?
I will second that.
And discussion? So let me just ask a question. This is above and beyond what we have today.
Well, Chad, you said 4, right, at the start?
I said we needed, let me go back to my numbers now, because I don't want to misspeak again.
4 or 3, yeah, maybe I misinterpreted that.
Let's go back to the other sheet. Let me pull that up.
We had 4, we needed 3. Was that maybe that?
We needed 3. Right now the numbers say we need 3.
Okay.
Yeah. We have 4, needed 3.
Yep. No, that's fine.
Not allowing for any growth.
Not allowing for any growth. Correct. And that's kind of, what I was kind of hearing is that 3 meets the need. If we want to say, I was kind of leaning towards a 3.5 number or something a little more, because again, I know how the numbers, I think they err low because it spreads out the use across all hours and it doesn't accommodate for some of those nuances. To try to say, to jump from, but 3.5 again, that could be just numbers. There's a way of figuring that out with maybe not physically 3.5 fields, but it's 3 new fields and we renovate another, or we renovate a couple and build a couple. But I think it's an hours thing for me that I look at. So I think at least 3, from my personal opinion, from a lacrosse perspective, I think we definitely could utilize 3. We use every piece of grass that we can find in town, from behind the library to the middle school to Cloudchester to elementary schools that no team has ever used before. And we're now sending kids down there 5 days a week, you know, from after school or from after work until dark. You know, and granted, when Pequannock Plains was built 20 years ago, the program didn't exist, right? And now it's grown, and we need more space. And I tend to think things like field hockey are going to do the same thing. You know, we have field hockey program at the high school. We don't have a youth program because there's just no place for it to go. But I could hope that in 20 years, when we're all thinking about how many more fields we might need then, that field hockey will be sitting here at the table, you know, saying, hey, we need some more field space, and we're having to practice behind schools and stuff like that. So from my personal perspective and from Groton Mystic Lacrosse perspective, I'd say 3 is a minimum. And, you know, I would definitely go 3.5 or support a 4, and then figure out how we do that in reality.
Jay, you had your hand up earlier.
Yes, what I was wondering is if we couldn't present to the council that the 3 is the bare minimum, but support Mark's motion for the 4. Just let the council know 3 is the bare minimum, 4 will allow for growth, so that the council can make an informed decision, you know, about how many they want to approve. And that brings in Larry's point about the growth. That's all.
Great. Thank you. Jerry?
Oh, I just wanted to point out there that, you know, that I guess a couple of things, and I just want to make sure that we're following the rules of meetings and whatnot. So there is a motion, and it has been seconded. But the point I actually, you know, I heard 2 synthetic and 2 natural turf fields. Chad, in your calculations, 2 synthetic fields plus 2. I mean, that's not 3.5. That's more like 5. You're muted there. Or 4.
Okay, yeah, it'd be more than 4, correct. I don't think it'd be a total of 5, but it would be,
Yeah, something
it'd be more than 4.
So yeah, so, you know, I guess Mark's motion there is kind of a motion for, and without trying to be, I know he said synthetic and natural turf, but again, we're looking at kind of that number that we can meet that number in a number of different ways. So, but there again, you know, if the motion is what it is and people agree with that, then we can certainly move forward, and that's what we would shoot for.
My opinion is I like the 2-2 idea, because I totally agree that 10 to 15 years from now, the growth of the area, and you're trying to actually get a little return on investment in this money somewhere along the way by charging others out of town, adult leagues. So I would be definitely for 2 and 2 personally. Chad?
I just a quick question for Chad is the synthetic field that they're building at the middle school, would that be included in the 2 and 2, or would that be, we're recommending new?
That's already included in our counts for today. We've already assumed it. We factored it in like it's already built.
Okay.
So all the fields for the 2020 school program are in our numbers now and counted.
So I think I'm trying to remember who made the point, but it was Jay, to have like a bare minimum, and then, you know, different levels, I think is a good idea, only because the costs are going to be, you know, they're going to be up there, and and this is just the rectangle fields, not the baseball fields that we've already talked about. And then I was also wondering, with regards to the leagues, not the leagues that use them, but when in baseball, we had a very drawn out conversation about travel teams. Are there travel teams that are using the soccer fields? And if they are, they're not, Jerry, there's no.
I don't know. I mean, a little bit, but they're not counted in our numbers, right? So I believe, Jerry, there's some travel soccer, but we don't count them because we count Groton Soccer Club, but we don't count. No.
We're not issuing any permits to Southeast Soccer or anybody like that. So those folks do not get permits for Pequannock Plains Park.
Okay.
So then
Right.
all of the like Groton, lacrosse and whatever they are, they're using them. They're all Groton Town leagues. They're not like third party. Okay. I think
Right.
that's important too. Like, you know, I know with regards to the baseball that they're saying that they're nonprofit, but I don't know what they pay out to the organizers. You know, I think nonprofit. I don't know. I'm not sure. I just want to make. I think that's an important point for me. So.
Any more discussion? Anyone else?
Yeah. I got my hand up. At any
Sorry.
rate, that's all right.
I can't see it. I apologize.
Yeah. I wonder if we should look at, now there's a motion on the floor and this isn't quite relevant, but if we should be looking at possibly forming regional fields. We have regional teams and we're drawing kids from a lot of different towns. Wouldn't it be a good idea to develop a regional field? I think there's a lot more open land in Ledyard, for instance, than there is in Groton. We have quite a bit of land in the north part of Groton. I'm not sure that the people who run leagues want to go out there. But when it comes to regional teams that are drawing kids from a lot of different towns, it would be nice if we got together with different towns and developed a regional field. As far as the motion on the table is, on the floor is concerned, I'm concerned about asking for 4 fields when we feel that we need 3. You stop and think that we're asking for $1 million per field just to build it. And of course, if we have to buy the land also, then you'd probably have to increase the cost by somewhere around 50 to 100%. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the cost, and I'm concerned about the effect it will have on the people of the town, the people who have nothing to do with sports, and the cost to the town. If we're talking about 3 baseball fields and 3 rectangular fields at between $1 and $2 million each, we're talking about somewhere in the range of 30% of the annual budget of the town outside of the education department. So it's a lot of money. And I think that we should present ourselves as looking for the less expensive way to accomplish what we need.
So Councilor Zapiri has a point there, and you can tell that he is an advocate for the taxpayers in the town. And I think one of the things that I would recommend to the committee here is, part of what we are charged with doing is coming up with what it is that we think is going to serve the town the best. And moving forward, I'm sorry there. Jim, I'm going to mute you. One of the things that we need to do is to kind of quantify this, and certainly part of our quantifying it is meeting the needs right now. And it's also, a little bit of a statement about what it is that we envision for the future as well. I don't, at this point in the process, I would be hesitant myself to kind of shortchange it, because we haven't asked citizens of the town yet, when we come up with the final number of fields that we're going to recommend and what the final cost of building them is going to be and where we anticipate putting them. At that point, it's a town decision, and it's a decision for the town council to decide, is that something that we want to try to address in a capital budget? Is it something that we want to consider sending to the voters to vote in a referendum on? Those are all kinds of questions that are later questions, and for the purposes of this task force here, I think the charge of the task force is to go ahead and give the best recommendation that we can give, and then you know, certainly we're going to do our work and kind of come up with a price tag on that. And then it's going to be up to decision makers to have all the data. Here's the need, here's the wants, here's the future, whatever, and here's what it's going to cost, and here's where we're going to put them. They put all that in there, and there's an opportunity at that time to say, no, we need to scale this back or whatever. But for right now, I guess my recommendation is to, you know, do our best in terms of presenting what it is that we think is going to serve the town the best in the future. And then, you know, it's going to be what it's going to be once those financial questions get asked.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, right now we're just looking at what the need is, opportunity for growth, and ignoring price tag right now, essentially. And we'll talk about that later.
And I'd stress a little bit too, that the numbers, you know, we did the numbers, they're analytical, right? And it tries to give us some data, but they're not going to be perfect. It's the litmus test to say, you know, it was back when we first did it in 2013, it was the Park and Rec Department trying to say, hey, look, we're getting all these people asking for the fields. We're getting nothing but complaints that we can't get enough people on the field. Tell us if we're right. You know, do we have enough and we're just hearing complaints, or do we not have enough? And so the numbers shouldn't really be used really hard concretely, right? Like if everybody says, hey, we need 5 fields because that's how much time we really need to be on the field, then the data just isn't quite right, right? And that's okay. And so, you know, Councilor Spear, I just want to caution a little bit to say, you know, we need 3. Well, we might need 5, right? The data right now, because it has to smooth everything out. We put on kids for an hour during the practice, but if they practice for an hour and a half sometimes, or, you know, different factors are in there, and different teams use things differently, so that, you know, that might not show up in the data. That's all I'm trying to say, is that it's not, don't just take the data perfectly. It's kind of the first benchmark. The idea of today's discussion is to talk with the different groups and say, you know, if we had 3 fields, would that meet your current needs? And Mark, I do like your comment about the 2 and 2, because you look at it from you know what you need to put on the field. You know how many teams you have, you know how much time you have, and you know how much space you need, right? So you look at it as a, you know, this is, if I had this, I could probably fix my needs, right? And so if you took it from that perspective, as Jerry kind of did, and said, you know, 2 synthetics, if we rate those as 1.5 fields apiece, and that's 3, and we had 2 grass fields, that's 5. So really what I'm hearing from you is you might need 5 fields, or the high school, to kind of meet its current needs, might need 5 fields to work on,
Right.
as opposed to what the data is showing for 3. So that's where we need to have that discussion, is what's the right number.
I think as well, you know, with the submarines being built and things like that, like I'm also thinking like our population in this town is going to increase, you know, and I know that's what we're kind of talking about as well, is, you know, we're projecting out where, hey, you know, we're talking 3 right now as to what we need based on what we currently have. You know, we're not factoring in what we may have, you know, 3, 4, 5 years from now, with our population increasing, and that could mean more sports within our town, you know, whether it's soccer, football, baseball, whatever it may be, you know. So I think at this point, I think I'm looking at like big picture, you know, and then knowing that at some point we're going to have to scale it back, you know. But I think, you know, I'm also looking at, maybe selfishly slightly, but I'm also looking at some of the issues that we've dealt with, you know, from a high school standpoint. And I know we're going to talk about that next week. You know, something else maybe we could suggest right now is the fact maybe that we look at after next week's meeting, when we talk about the high school and what is needed, maybe at that point, then we make a decision based on a number of rectangles. I don't know, you know, so that way we have everything we need moving forward, and maybe there's some information shared at that point that helps us kind of formulate a better, maybe it's not 2 and 2, maybe it's 3 and 1, maybe it's 1 and 3, you know, I don't know, you know, but maybe something to think about.
Any other discussion from anyone that hasn't been discussed? So Jerry, I guess the motion on the floor is for two, or the motion that was made by Mark, 2 synthetic fields and 2 turf fields. So if we go forward with that, then we'll have to have a vote.
Yep. Correct.
So we're prepared to do that now. So all in favor of the motion on the floor for 2 synthetic fields, 2 turf fields, I guess raise your hand is probably the easiest way to do it. I would vote yes.
Yes.
You good?
Okay.
Yes.
And I think, I don't, yeah. I think I have all the members on the thing, but anybody opposed to that?
Anybody opposed?
Mr. Zapiri? Okay. And then
I'm still
anybody,
Dr.
Good here. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I said I'm still Dr. Zapiri.
I'm sorry. You're right.
But yeah,
I apologize. Okay,
Did we get Jim Sothers's vote too, or no?
Oh yeah, sorry, I don't, my camera, I'm having some issues, but my vote is yes. Thank you.
I don't think there was any abstentions there, Frank.
okay, so our consensus is 4 squares, 2 and 2, 2 synthetic, 2 turf. And I guess that's it for our new business for tonight. If we move on, next is our old business. And we have old business, we have our meeting scheduled for next week at 5 o'clock on the 18th. We'll be talking, our focus or our agenda item will be about the high school and their needs. So that would be for next week, the 11th at, excuse me, the 18th at 5 o'clock.
Who all's been invited to that?
My question.
So I don't know of anybody else who has been invited specifically. I don't have any. I guess it would be, you know, we've got Ted on the call. We've got Rich has been a regular participant here. We've got Mark. So, you know, if there's anybody else that somebody thinks we ought to invite, I certainly can do that. So if anybody does want somebody to invite for that meeting, if you would just please send that to me so I can invite them as a guest.
Yeah, I'll send you Andrew Lefebvre, the band director's info.
Very good.
Yeah, I was just curious if we should have, you know, coaches. Mark, I don't know how you feel about, you know, do we have coaches involved in representing to let them know frustrations, or is that passed through you, or how do we want to get as much input as possible from a high school perspective?
I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I think I don't want it to, I mean, I think there could be too much opinion, and I think it might slow what we're trying to get to. I think I have a pretty good synopsis as to everything that's, you know, that's needed, and based on our programs and projections, and, you know, basically all aspects of the high school, you know, and as well as possibly even some middle school as well. So I think I have a pretty good, you know, roundabout idea, numbers wise, things like that I can share with everybody. So, you know, I think I will send, I'll do this. I'll send an email to the coaches and ask them for any additional input that they feel that I should share with the committee next week. But honestly, I don't think having, you know, 35 coaches on this call is going to be, we're not going to get much out of it, honestly.
Sounds good.
If he doesn't know, then he'll ask me too. So
Yeah.
between the two of us, I think we got it.
That's 15 years worth of
AD,
directing
right.
at the high school. So
I agree with that opinion, by the way, Mark and Rich.
yeah. I mean, you're already on it, so you got your choice. You can already speak your piece.
All right. So I guess with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second, I got dinner.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Yeah.